Welcome to the Dean Speaker Series hosted by Dean Doug Shackelford in the Kenan Institute of Private Enterprise. I'm Greg Brown. I'm the director of the Kenan Institute. I'm proud to serve as one of today's hosts. The Dean Speaker Series is made possible through the generous support of the Archie K. Davis Endowment, which was created to bring outstanding scholars and leaders from the fields of business, education, and government to share thoughts and insights with UNC Kenan-Flagler, the university, and the community at large. As part of the finance faculty here at Kenan-Flagler, I'm really excited to be able to introduce the speaker today. Bill Rogers is Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of SunTrust Banks, one of the nation's largest financial services companies, serving 4.9 million households and business clients. SunTrust operates an extensive retail banking network throughout the Southeast and Mid-Atlantic states. They serve clients nationally in corporate investment banking, commercial real estate, mortgage, private wealth, and consumer lending. A purpose-driven company dedicated to lighting the way to financial well-being, SunTrust is leading the On-Up movement to inspire Americans to gain financial confidence. Bill Rogers began his career in 1980, joining the commercial banking division of the company. He held increasingly senior positions in corporate and commercial banking, corporate finance, and private wealth management prior to being named president in 2008 and then chief operating officer in 2010. He was appointed president and CEO in June 2011 and became chairman and CEO the following January. He received his MBA from University of Georgia. I'm proud to say his bachelor's degree from UNC Kenan-Flagler. So please join me in welcoming Bill Rogers to the stage.
Great, thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. It's great to have everybody here. And Bill, welcome back to Chapel Hill.
Great, it's great to be back, as always.
Yes. So here's what we're going to do. I've got a few questions for Bill, and we're going to talk a little bit, and then we're going to throw the floor open to questions from our students. So if you've got some questions, we'll be to you in a little bit. Bill, the school and the bank have done a number of things together of late, and it's been really productive, I think, on both sides. I thought we'd just start with, I know there's a real purpose-driven mission mindset of the bank, and just help me understand where that comes from, how you guys think about being purpose-driven and mission-driven. What's the genesis? What's your mindset on that?
You know, we started an effort about 7 years ago when I first took this position that we really wanted to be purpose-oriented. But when I get asked about when did it start, my answer is 150 years ago at the inception of our company and the predecessor banks that we work with. They've always been client-focused, always wanted to serve communities, and always wanted to operate together. But we used a lot of different words. Everybody said it a different way. Everybody might have executed it a different way. And coming out of the financial crisis, I mean, clearly reputational opportunity for our industry, no doubt about that. And we felt an opportunity and an obligation to define what we do, use the same words, coalesce around the fact that we're here for a bigger obligation. We define it as lighting the way to financial well-being. We want to help all Americans take a first step towards financial confidence, and then we have a lot of things that support that. But it really started with the genesis of what our company was made of, and I fundamentally believe that people want to do business with companies that stand for something. I think if we all think about companies that we do business with, we probably subconsciously or consciously say, "Oh, it's because this reason." And it's usually not price, location, or it's usually deeper than that. And equally importantly, I think people want to work for a company that stands for something.
And how do you sustain that mindset? The last thing you said about working for it, how do you sustain that within the culture? Because you also got a bottom line that,
Sure.
And you got capital markets and all those sorts of things.
And I think they're inextricably linked, so I don't think they're segregated. I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence that we started down our purpose journey and that our financial performance has improved every year in all the ways that we measure ourselves. So I think those things are inextricably linked, but I'm unwilling to link them specifically. because I think as soon as you link them, then you break the promise of what we're trying to do from a purpose standpoint. And the reinforcement just comes in the daily activities. It comes in everything that we do. There is never a point in time when I'm standing in front of teammates or standing in front of clients or standing in front of a community when I don't talk about purpose. The good news is they're not saying, oh, here comes Bill with that purpose thing again. They're saying, oh yeah, that makes sense, that resonates, that's what we're doing. And then we support it in literally hundreds of ways. Maybe one of the most overt ones for our own teammates is we give everyone a day off for their own day of purpose to focus on their own financial well-being. And then again, there are dozens and dozens of other proof points every day to make sure that we're doing it. And I check on it. I mean, that's part of my job. I mean, my ears are very attuned. If I listen to how our teammates are talking about their business or what they're saying, I'm very attuned to, does it start with purpose? I was just in one of our call centers and listening to how our teammates were talking to our clients, and I wanted to make sure that it was focused on, we're here to help you. We're here to light the way to financial well-being. That's why we're here.
Over the last decade, we've seen the financial crisis. We're all enjoying a strong economy now, ups and downs. Where do you see the banking industry? Where do you see your bank? And what are the opportunities and challenges right now?
Yeah, I think, of course, your vantage point is always from where you're sitting. So I respect that, acknowledge that. But I just don't think there's a better time to be in financial services right now. I just think it's a fantastic business. Our field of vision, our tentacles into everything that's happening with the economy has never been deeper and never been stronger. The issues are so important, and the things that we can do to help shape where communities are going and where the country is going from an economic standpoint. I think we're clearly in a strong market. Consumer spending, consumer confidence, business investment, business confidence, they're all at highs. The conversations that we have with clients are all leaning forward. There's some uncertainties out there that happen that may be I describe it as a 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but the net of that is 1 step forward. And I feel like that's where we are from an economic standpoint. And again, I think banks, SunTrust in particular, just have an incredible, role in continuing to support that and perpetuate that.
You've got your usual competition of other banks. You've also got non-financial, traditional lenders. Help me understand how you compete. How do you think about the marketplace?
We think about the marketplace, and when we think about when somebody says, who do you compete against, the list goes on. The list is whoever a consumer and a business interacts with is who we compete against. We compete against Amazon for the client experience. We compete against any business that our clients are dealing with. So we think about competition extremely broadly. Then as it relates to the non-bank lenders, we have a term internally which is cooperation. So there are lots that we're competing with every day, but others that we're working very closely with. We have a set of core operating tenets and a set of core belief systems that start with the client gets to own when and how they make the decision. We don't own it. And so wherever the client wants to make the decision, that's where we want to be. If we can get there on our own, that's great. That's probably the preferred path. If we get there through working with someone else, that's fine, because we want to make sure that where the client makes that decision, that we're at that forefront.
I think most of us think of SunTrust as a southeastern bank.
Right.
Serves our state. But I know that you've been growing your footprint. What is the future growth that you've got envisioned for SunTrust?
Yeah, when we came out of the financial crisis, we set really a sort of a core four tall tent poles of a corporate strategy, which hasn't changed over that time. And the first was to be a more diverse company. And that's diversity both from a risk standpoint, but also an opportunity standpoint. The second was to invest in growth opportunities. The third was to be a more efficient company. And the fourth was to continue to increase our return to shareholders. And the diverse part is where that geographic expansion comes. So, we learned that, being overly concentrated in any one thing has a high beta attached to it. You can get a lot of growth from that, but you can also have a lot of risk associated with that. So we looked to diversify our businesses. We saw the things that we were doing. If something is really applicable in Charlotte for clients, shouldn't that also be applicable in Cincinnati? And shouldn't that also be applicable in San Francisco? So if we have a competitive advantage, we have a way of operating that's relevant to those clients, we shouldn't really be constrained necessarily by geography. Our retail footprint is constrained by, regulatory, and so that primarily is Southeast, but the other parts of our business are really national in scope, and we really follow where client needs are and where our expertise meets, and geography is only an interesting part of that equation, not a determinant.
A little advice for our students.
Okay.
You've seen a lot of professionals over your career.
Are you defining how long my career has been? Is that what this?
Since you and I are about the same
Exactly.
age,
Exactly.
we got a lot of history. You've hired a lot, you've coached a lot, you've mentored a lot. Tell me what the characteristics of people who have been successful in your experience, and what our students might be able to glean from that.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of common traits, but in fairness, they're also changing as well. I think as our company changes and as corporate America changes, in talking with a group of students earlier today, I said, you own your career. Well, that was very different when we came along. The company owned our career, or the institution that we work for owned our career, and the philosophy shifted, and I think very appropriately, to you own your career. You get to raise your hand, you get to question things, you get to ask for things, and I think that's a really important and significant development where we are right now. But in that light and in that context, I have had an opportunity to work with and work for me just exceptional executives. And exceptional human beings and incredibly successful. And some of the common traits are, they're there. They raise their hand. And if there's an opportunity there and you look around, they're first in line. They're always at the forefront. They're always willing to pay the upfront price for whatever it takes to be successful. And they're willing to do that. The second, and I think this really applies today, is they just have a love of learning, is they want to learn, they want to expand. I mean, the most important thing I think you'll learn as a student is, and you might not like me saying this, but what you learn today is not actually that important. And sorry. But exactly, but learning how to learn is what's critical, and being a lifelong learner. Those who are really successful are lifelong learners. They are continually reinvesting in themselves and learning how to reinvent themselves on a frequent basis. And then those who also just figure out how to do it all, and they make those trade-offs in life. So we all have trade-offs. I don't believe in work-life balance. I don't think that's a good term because it's never balanced. And if you seek to balance, you'll always be constantly disappointed. But it is about trade-offs. And I think those who are successful, they make the trade-offs that work for them. And everybody has different trade-offs. Mine would be different than yours. But they make the trade-offs that work for them and make them happy, successful, content people in their lives, and that translates into how they perform.
I really like that answer. I told you earlier today, I just steal things from people and never give them attribution. I may have just stolen another thing.
Well, I've made a really nice career out of that. So plagiarism works very well.
We all have learned a lot of lessons along the way. What's the toughest lesson you've learned during your career?
Oh gosh, I've learned a lot of them. I think the toughest lessons you learn, particularly in our business, is that every decision impacts somebody. And it may impact a teammate, it may impact a client, and it may not always be positive. And you have to learn those along the way. You have to see the implications of your decisions And while they may make sense for you and maybe they make sense for the shareholder, they really didn't make sense for a teammate or they really didn't make sense for a client. And again, back to the purpose journey, that's trying to get all that sequenced right. Because those have been a lot of tough lessons, and I can speak for myself that I learned, that the decisions have implications. And the implications are wide-ranging. And if you don't spend the time learning what the end of the decision chain looks like, you can get pretty isolated. And those are hard, tough lessons. And the other, which I think is critical, and it certainly is true for SunTrust, is you can't do it alone. It does not exist. Nobody makes a successful career on their own. They always have a dependency on someone else. There's a team-oriented. There are lots of things that are involved. Luck's involved. I mean, there's lots of things that are involved. And the tough lesson is just making sure that you just never forget that. And whenever you're out there on your own, you're probably not at a good place. If you look left and right and there isn't somebody standing beside you, you might not be in the best place to make a good decision or to lead an effort or whatever it might be.
It wasn't very long ago, there used to be the finance industry, used to be the tech space.
Right,
Now, everywhere I go, all I hear about is Fintech.
right.
What does Fintech mean to you? What does Fintech mean to SunTrust?
Yeah, I'm really not a fan of the term fintech because I think it's what you said. It's sort of the eye of the beholder, and people tend to define that this is and this isn't. The fact is, to your question, it all is. I mean, I think we're a really large fintech company. I mean, I think that's exactly what we do. I mean, the innovation that happens within our company, we talked about earlier, the cooperation and the partnerships that we have with companies that might be considered a fintech, the development and the deployment of technology that we might get from somebody else across a wide client base, and doing that at speeds that are very different than where we were in the past. I think we're all in the fintech business, and particularly large financial services company. I think we have to be early, often adopters of technology. And again, back to your question, that's what our clients would expect. I mean, if we think about who we compete against, that's the client setting the bar. We don't get to set the bar. The client sets the bar, and the client's setting the bar higher and higher every day. And we've got to do everything we can to make sure that we're not only reaching that bar, but anticipating where that bar is going to go.
The workplace is changing for every industry. Automation has really come into the banking industry in a major way over the last decade. What does the workplace of the bank look like in the next decade, and what sort of skills will the worker in the bank need?
Yeah, and I think back to the earlier question about what makes people successful is the constant reinventing of what they do, because what they do is going to be supported completely differently by technology. And that's not to say, this job's going to go away and this one's going to be created. The whole chain's going to change. And technology and artificial intelligence, machine learning, all the avenues change the way in which we make decisions. It also creates an immense amount of information from which to make a decision, so it can be so much more informed. There are jobs in the bank that are going to change. We are very committed to reskilling the teammates in our company. We provide lots of training, lots of opportunities. So if we see a particular area that's going to change, we want to make sure that we're finding ways for those teammates to reskill and have different activities. And that's so critical because we don't know, and it's moving fast. It would be hard for me to say today that this % of employees or teammates' responsibilities are going to be this 5 years from now. I don't know. I just know they're going to be different. And we have to make sure that we're agile as a company and agile in terms of what we do to adapt and adopt at rates of speed that are very different than when I first started.
So while we're talking about change, AI, machine learning, blockchain, I could go on and on.
Right.
Things we didn't even know to talk about
Correct.
Just a few years ago. They're all exploding. Where does SunTrust sit on this? What sort of investments are you making? How do you evaluate these sorts of things? Where do you see this going?
Yeah, and I think clearly one of the most important jobs that I have is where you allocate capital. I mean, if a CEO really at the end of the day, I thought when I got this job you'd have a huge dashboard of things that you're going to do. Your dashboard's actually pretty small, but it's important. And one of the things is where and how you allocate capital. And so it's a combination of things. I mean, we've made a lot of advancements in AI, in our case, in our private wealth business. So a lot of the decisioning that happens behind the scenes in balancing portfolios and creating fixed income and equity trades and those type of things, a lot more of that's done with AI. And the whole focus has got to be end to end. Are you transforming it end to end? Are you creating a better teammate or a better client experience? So our level of investment is some multiples higher today in virtually all those technologies and in technology as a whole. You and I were talking about earlier is technology from a strategy standpoint has sort of moved itself from a technology as an enabler of strategy, which is where it used to be, is technology actually as definer of strategy. So the choices that we make today are exponentially widened by the advent of technology that didn't exist before. We can do things today, we can make choices about how and where we do business that we just couldn't have made before.
Exactly. If you're starting all over, like many of our students are, what advice would you give to them if they were going down a path like you went down?
I think one of the challenges, and I see this in my own children, is they think that the first job and the first week and the first choice defines them as people. Nothing could be further from the truth. Mine was the opposite. I didn't think I would go into banking. I went to a bank to learn some things, and I thought I'd go get a real job somewhere else. I mean, that's sort of how I thought about it. So I didn't think about that job as defining me. And I think for students the best thing about the first job is that it opens your aperture to what's available out there. And now I was really lucky in my case, and I hope it will be for many of you. Mine happened to be at my own company. I had 6 or 7 careers. I've just had them at SunTrust. So my aperture was widened. I said when I started at the company, and maybe this will be defining, when I came off the campus and I interviewed, I said there were only 2 things that I wanted to do in the bank. I wanted to be in real estate and international. Guess what are the only 2 things in a 38-year career that I did not do at our company, which was real estate and international. So that doesn't define you. I think working with great people and having an opportunity to do really good work that's meaningful and that's important in the world, I think is sort of the best way to make the decisions. And things have an incredible way of taking care of themselves after that. But it's not that first job and that first week do not define you. I'm sure your career was the same. You probably didn't start wanting to be the dean of the Carolina Business School.
That's right. Life has a lot of curves along the way. Well, so let's maybe open it up, see if we have some students that have some questions. And I know we have some mics, so we'll wait until we get a mic to you to answer those questions. So, yeah, back here in the very back, if we can get a mic there. Oh.
Hello, thank you so much for coming out. Chris Karras, a Kenan-Flagler Business School student,
Right.
Kenan Scholar. So especially within a lot of our classes, we've heard a lot of discussion around this generational change. A lot of businesses are struggling, trying to figure out how they can serve different generations, especially with millennials and even the generation following them. There's a lot of trends within those generational changes. Millennials more risk adverse, a lot of them renting, not buying, these different behavioral patterns. How is SunTrust looking to serve those different target markets?
Yeah, it's great. It's a great question. And it first starts as it's what your company reflects. So we have 5 generations now in our company, which is really great. And you've got to make sure that you're engaging all 5 of those generations in our decision framework. I was actually very concerned that the millennials probably didn't have an equal voice in some of the decision making, so we created a whole network, teammate advisory network, a generations network, to really make sure that their voice gets involved in terms of the decisions that we're making. So the first part is you got to start. You have to have a voice. Everybody has to have a voice in the company and in the decisions. That being said, I think as soon as you try to define a group a certain way, you're going to find out you're wrong. So you said millennials are less risk takers. Guess what? There are a lot of millennials that take a lot of risk. So I think it's understanding the general dynamics. It's having that represented in your company, so having that voice heard. But I think it's also being very, very careful about casting groups that make decisions one way. I'll give you an example. We made a change to the front page of our mobile digital offering. The biggest outcry I got, a letter writing campaign, was from a retirement center in Florida. Now, so as soon as you sort of say, well, gosh, wait a minute, what we expected that was going to be a millennial issue, or that was going to be a high digital adopters, and this generation isn't a high digital adopter. All that's not. You have to just be careful about making assumptions that guide certain decisions. Very, very focused on what are the client behaviors, what are the tendencies, and making sure that we're in the right places and that we're relevant to, in this case, 5 generations. And that's a complex assignment, because for a company like ours, we don't get to choose. We don't get to say we're only going to serve this market, because we're a bank. We have an obligation to serve the communities that we're in. And that means that we have an obligation to serve everyone in that community, and to do that in the different ways that they want to interact with our institution.
Who's next?
And I'll also say I have 4 children and 3 in-laws that serve as my millennial advisory committee. I've never actually asked for any, but I've received a lot.
I have 4 and 2 in-laws, and I'm the same recipient of good information.
That is great. They give me a lot. They give me a lot of great primary research.
Yep, I'm clueless, I'm told. Right up here, we got one up here toward the front.
Hey, thanks so much for being here today. 2 questions, one looking at the past and one looking towards the present.
Okay.
With regard to the past, what was maybe the best piece of literature you read in further understanding the GFC? And then in looking towards the future, we're seeing a lot of aggressive private lending strategies kind of coming into the marketplace. In terms of where risk dials are set and what you're nervously watching, what do you think could spawn the next crisis or slow touchdown? Thanks.
Great questions. I'm always careful about, the question of recommend the one book or the one seminal thing, because I don't think there is one thing, but it's really important to read a lot, and to read a wide variety of opinions. So I read a lot of business books. I just finished one from Daniel Kroll called Culture Code, which is really sort of aligned with what we're thinking about from purpose. I read a lot about that. I'm reading a lot of really, really technical books about AI and where the innovator DNA and all where the world's going, to try to make sure that I'm learning and expanding. And then there's just a lot of classic business books that I don't think have gone out of style. From the flywheel and the concepts of. I think it's just read a lot and don't get caught up in a genre. I think that's probably the riskiest part. Is our executive team, we share a lot of books. If somebody's read a book, we say, gosh, maybe this would be really good. And there are a couple that we say they're really great, and we're actually going to mandate that we read them. We're going to talk about them. There's a great book out called Mindset, which is a really good concept of just, do you have the right mindset? Are you forward-leaning in terms of what you're thinking about? And then as it relates to your question about some of the more aggressive lending on the consumer side, which I think is where you were going, and then what are some of the things that we worry about? I do worry about, and we spend a lot of time, and the reason we talk about lighting the way to financial well-being, there's a lot of, despite everything I said about the economy, and all those are facts, 50% of Americans don't have $500 saved for an emergency. 1/3 of Americans don't have anything saved for retirement. 75% of us lose sleep at night over something that's financially related. So there's a lot of stress out there from a financial standpoint. So I do worry about people who the recovery, although it is a good recovery, everyone's not benefited. And we, I think as a community, and certainly we think as a company, we have an obligation to increase that net as much as possible and try to make as many people benefit. And we do that through a lot of the things in terms of financial education, and we can talk about a lot of those different things, but a lot of things that we invest in. I worry about the people who are on the edge, who do succumb to a lot of the predatory practices. Unfortunately, some of that still exists. And I don't think that's something that will tip us from an economic standpoint, but it's something that's shouldn't be socially acceptable to us, that people are being infringed upon in terms of their financial fragility. In terms of things I worry about of the economy, I think we spend a lot of time, as you can imagine, stressing our portfolio in every humanly way possible. We stress it for interest rates, we stress it for commodity prices, we stress it for tariff-related issues, and there's not really one thing that we'd say, gosh, this is the thing. You know, housing was the thing before, and that this would be the one thing. The things that I keep my eye on, I think discount rates have probably not kept up as well as they should on the real estate side. So there could be some chances for some bubbles in the commercial real estate side. We see a lot of leverage lending that's done outside of the banking system, so highly leveraged loans. As much as 1/3 of that's done outside the banking system. So some of that leverage and some of that risk has a contagion possibility to come back into the financial system. So we worry and keep an eye on that, even though it doesn't sit in our own portfolio. It has a peripheral chance of impacting our results. And then we just keep an eye on everything, you know, because that's our job. I mean, our job's to actually just, I tell everybody looks for green shoots. I'm looking for black shoots. You know, I'm looking for brown shoots. I'm looking for things that may, what are the things around the corner that could be risky to our economy and to our company.
Right up here up front. Can we get a mic up here?
Right.
Talk about how your more broadly SunTrust approach to talent management has evolved given that shift.
Yeah, the question was really how has our talent management evolved since the concept of the teammate owning more of their career. And the first is we've expanded exponentially the amount of opportunities that we offer teammates in terms of their expansion, so they can get their college degrees online. They can get specific degrees online. Every teammate at SunTrust can have a career coach. Every single 23,000 teammates, if they desire, can have a career coach. We partner with another educational institution I won't mention that provides other educational background and opportunities. So the amount of training that we offer and that teammates have access to has sort of grown exponentially. That's the first piece. We do a lot of work with engagement surveys, and that's what came out with teammates. Is that we want more opportunities to expand our capabilities. And then the other is we encourage. We have a very significant talent management process. I would say, if I think about where I spend my time, I've got to spend, a very, very high percent of my time on talent, and we ask all of our leaders to spend a really high percent of their time on talent. Nothing's more important. So the level of an intensity of the conversations with teammates about their careers and about their opportunities and about their performance has again sort of grown exponentially. And it's a partnership between the teammate and the company in terms of their personal development. And what we want to do is make sure that we know a lot and know your hopes, dreams, and wishes. You want to know how you're doing against those, and then what are the opportunities to expand and learn more about your own personal development and what's available in the company.
I'd like to ask a question about fintech that you mentioned earlier. You said that SunTrust is a fintech company.
Right.
Yet a lot of the fintech startups tend to be niche companies. They tend to either focus on robo-advising and wealth management or loans to small businesses. So are you competing across the board in all areas, or do you see the competition to be much more intense in certain areas that you tend to focus on?
No, I think from the fintech world, I mean, the wake-up call for the financial services industry from fintech is, are you doing the right thing? Are you doing what clients want? Are you responding to a client need? And the success of fintech companies is they're finding a fissure. They're finding something that a client wants that is not being satisfied in another mechanism. And so we're doing the same thing. We're obviously looking for the same fissures. And as I mentioned earlier, then we also cooperate. So we work with the companies. And it's, if I can think about it, we're actually working with companies on the small business side. We're working with them on private wealth side. We're working with them on the consumer lending side. So I don't know that there's a particular area. We see opportunities to improve what we do in almost every area of our businesses, and we see opportunities to partner. We've created a whole mechanism within our company to explore, understand, and find ways to work with fintech companies and work with ways to better satisfy and anticipate what our clients need. As I said before, I mean, the big change is the client's the driver. I mean, it used to be that you had to come through the financial services and you had to stop at the bank. So if you were from, I'm going to do something, buy a home, buy a car, invest in my business, there was a stop that said it was the bank. That stop doesn't exist today. That's not required. So what we have to do is get in the front of that decision. So where that client's making that decision and make sure we're doing it in a way that's responsive and the way that they want to engage, and whether that's digitally or whether it's physically where they want to be, and whatever mechanism it may be. I view it as when the concept of fintech comes up and the concept of competition, whatever, I view it as total opportunity and upside. As I said, I mean, I think we think we're a fintech company. We're doing the same type of investments, and we're not ground down and it had to be invented here to be good. It may be invented somewhere else and it's really good, and we want to find out a way to work with it and work with them if it solves a client need and it helps back to our purpose, and if it helps light the way to financial well-being for one of our clients.
Greg.
I'll talk loud. So you mentioned a little bit about the responsibility that banks have in the broader community, and I think in the Southeast, it's a little bit unusual in that there's been tremendous boom time over the last 30, 40 years in the Southeast, a lot of wealth generated. There's still a lot of pockets of poverty, especially separating between urban, rural areas as well as urban areas. Sort of wondering, how does SunTrust do that responsibility, but also more broadly from a banking sector? I know you've done that
Right.
the financial services industry and banking more broadly can have an impact on wealth distribution and income equality. I'm just sort of curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, and I think we play a big role in all that. We take that responsibility seriously, and I don't think it's necessarily urban-rural. It can be urban-urban. It can be rural-rural. I mean, there are inequities in what we've seen from our recovery. And as I said before, we want to make sure that we're expanding that net and that denominator as much as possible. We live by a pretty simple philosophy that one of our founders had, is if you build your community, you build your bank. And that's a pretty good place to start. That's our obligation and the opportunity is to build really great communities, because when the community benefits and when all the community benefits, we're gonna do better. Shareholders are gonna do better. Our teammates are gonna do better. Our company's gonna do better. As it relates to sort of specific things, I mean, we had a great meeting with the dean a couple of years ago. You were very nice to tell me that you thought SunTrust could beef it up, and you did it very eloquently and very professionally, and I heard the message. And then we look for opportunities. So not only are we significantly expanding our opportunities here in the business school, and I was really glad to hear that some of that's being felt, but we also found an opportunity to work with the Kenan Institute and NC Growth and the Smart Growth. And so, making a significant investment from our foundation to really help, in this case, starting off in the investments in Elizabeth City, and helping primarily minority-owned companies and companies that represent and have been underrepresented from either a capital standpoint or a business advice standpoint. And so that's a great way for us to participate, and it is totally aligned with lighting the way to financial well-being and the things that we stand for as a company, and it helps us to expand our relationship with the university and really help, in this case, the parts of eastern North Carolina that, in fairness, probably haven't benefited as much as the rest of the state. And what are the challenges and what are the opportunities to expose them to, really good sources of capital, really good sources of advice, clients and opportunities in places where they can network where they wouldn't have otherwise. So, there are, again, hundreds of examples of ways that we try to do that. As it relates to CRA specifically, I don't think a lot about CRA, and I don't mean to say that in a negative way, because we get rated and those kinds of things. If we're doing the right things, if we're purpose-oriented and we're lighting the way to financial well-being and we're representing our communities well, CRA is going to work great. CRA that's a scorecard. I don't like to manage to a scorecard. I don't want to manage to are we playing the game correctly? Are we doing the right things? And the benefits will come from that. I think the industry has a role to play. I think we're playing it individually, and I think we're playing it much better collectively. We work in close collaboration with our regulators on these issues. This is not something that we're arguing about. We're just trying to figure out how to do it better and more effectively and more efficiently.
Other questions? Well, Bill, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I have really appreciated the relationship we've had with SunTrust, and I thank you coming today and speaking with our students.
Being on campus is a great joy, and it's great to come back here, and I feel I'm obligated to thank you, but also obligated to thank your faculty and your staff, and all the students. Thank you for making my degree worth so much more. I have always been proud to wear my alumni status and talk about graduating from the Kenan School, but after meeting some of the students today and seeing all the work you've done, one, I don't think you would have let me in the Kenan School back again now, but just for making that so valuable, it's really impressive, and it's really great to be part of that lifelong group. Thank you.